Today, milk is a staple beverage across the United States. It is seen as a natural, healthy beverage, helping children grow big and strong. However, milk did not always have this pristine reputation. We will trace the history of milk in the U.S. from pre to post Industrial Revolution, following the changes in public perception of the beverage and the role of the government in shaping it.
Before the Industrial Revolution in America, milk was hardly the ubiquitous beverage that it is today. During colonial times, some towns had a common herd that provided the dairy for the whole community, but butter and cheese were much more important products than milk, and milk was much more expensive. This meant that people only had milk if they had their own cow or if they were wealthy enough to afford it.
By the early 19th century, though, enough people were in the business of producing milk that prices dropped to a reasonable level. Fresh milk began to be seen as a complete form of nutrition, universally consumed by humans. This perception, plus the newly affordable prices, led to an increase in consumption of and demand for milk.
With the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the nation's population converged in developing cities, and people became separated from the source of their milk supply. There were two solutions to this separation: bring the milk to the city or bring the whole cow. Each solution had its own obstacles.
Milk produced outside the city had to be transported long distances, which increased the risk of the growth of bacteria if it was left uncovered or allowed to become too warm.
Cow relocation was even more hazardous. According to Wright, cows producing milk near urban areas lived in small, unsanitary sheds and were fed swill, a watery byproduct of distilleries. In these close quarters, milk was often contaminated with cow excrement and other sources of disease. Thus, urbanization thrust milk health problems to the attention of progressive reformers.
In 1858, progressive newspaper publisher Frank Leslie exposed these conditions with a shocking article describing and illustrating the awful conditions of the cowsheds and the implications these conditions had on the milk supply. An excerpt from Leslie's paper reads, "The stables which surround the distilleries are dilapidated and wretchedly filthy. The cows are arranged in double rows, their heads to the swill troughs and their tails toward each other, so close that sometimes one cow actually lies on the other. The swill comes rushing and foaming down the troughs, boiling hot and reeking with subtle poison."
With these horrors of milk production brought to the attention of the public, the former perception of the purity of urban milk was devastated. By the mid-19th century, doctors were convinced that contaminated milk had caused epidemics of several diseases. Specifically, milk was linked with poor health in children, and was seen as an improper food for infants because it generally led to high infant mortality rates.
An Illinois court described the importance of milk like this: "There is no article of food in more general use than milk, whose impurity or unwholesomeness may more quickly, more widely, and more seriously affect the health of those who use it." This created enough motivation for real progress to be made in milk reform.
In 1912, New York passed laws mandating the pasteurization of all milk sold in the state. Pasteurization is a process in which milk is heated in order to kill the bacteria that cause disease and spoilage without significantly altering taste or quality. From the beginning to the end of the decade in which these laws were passed, the number of typhoid cases in New York City, which had been linked to milk by the U.S. Public Health Service, dropped over 80%.
Despite steady and increasingly aggressive opposition from dairy parties, the government upheld milk regulation laws concerning the introduction of foreign substances, failure to follow proper sanitary practices, and removal of nutritional components. Even after these improvements, steps still had to be taken in order to repair the public perception of milk, which the industrial problems had severely damaged. In order to return to the idea of milk as pure and healthy, the government embarked on a series of campaigns in schools and advertising.
In 1919, the U.S. Department of Agriculture partnered with dairy councils to launch a cooperative campaign to promote milk drinking in schools. They had found the correlation between high percentages of undernourishment in children and low consumption of milk. They attributed this lack of consumption largely to a lack of information on the importance of milk in normal child development, and thus sought to insert milk consumption into people's ideas of health and development.
Following the milk campaigns, the USDA saw a 12% reduction in undernourishment among school children whose communities were targeted. The campaign to increase milk consumption in schools is perhaps best illustrated by the National School Lunch Act of 1946, which mandated that each lunch include between 1/2 to 2 pints of whole milk.
Besides establishing milk in schools, the government also created advertising campaigns which promoted milk to the greater public. In the 1940s, under the Works Progress Administration, artists were subsidized to make posters like these to advertise the benefits of milk to the public.
In 1993, the California Milk Processor Board created the Got Milk campaign, which ran for more than 20 years and used celebrities and pop culture to promote the consumption of milk.
Today, Got Milk has given way to the Milk Life campaign, which, in an uphill battle to fight the currently decreasing consumption of milk, focuses on its protein content. As lower-calorie options like almond and soy milk become more popular, the food industry is accommodating the 60% of Americans, mostly minorities unaccounted for in the 20th century, who are lactose intolerant. This trend begins a new era in the American perception of milk, which, as we have seen, has changed from pre to post industrial times and continues to change today.